Hi everybody, I'm Lis. Come on a journey with me and you can see how I see. In touch. Hi everyone, I'm going to talk a little bit today about different strategies a person who's totally blind or visually impaired can use when they're cutting. This is often a challenge for the students and clients that I work with, so I'm going to kind of give some ideas. This cutting board that I have is just a white cutting board, so it would work really well for cutting objects that are darker. If someone's totally blind, the color doesn't matter, but someone who has a little bit of vision, it's very helpful for them to have a work area that contrasts with whatever it is they're cutting or working with in general for cooking. So you can get different color cutting boards. Lots of times they're sold where one is meant for the poultry and another one is for the beef. And I grabbed this white one, but just so you're aware, that's a strategy that people can use. Another good low vision technique for anything doing in the kitchen is to make sure that you have adequate lighting. Many people are working in conditions that are too dark. They can't see what they're doing. If they have good lighting, often they can get a little bit farther back from their work area and they can see what they're doing. Again, for the totally blind person, not so important, but those are just some basic work area. Cutting boards sometimes slide around. This one has little grippy things in the corners so that it won't. But if you have one that sometimes when they get warped a little bit, they sort of spin around. Like this cutting board, I'll just set it on top of this other one. This is my favorite cutting board. I think I've had it for 30 years. It's a silly little tiny one, but when it's warped now, so it kind of slides around. So I just flip it over and it does better on that side. But you could put this non-skid material under it. You can buy this to be a shelf liner. People buy it to put under an area rug to keep it from slipping. But if you put this under it, this is way bigger than what you would need for this, then it's not moving now. So it's still shifting a little bit. This cutting board really needs to be retired, but it's just an idea of something that you could use to make sure things aren't sliding around. You want a stable working area. I usually recommend to my students that they get everything out that they're going to need. I am not always really disciplined about that for myself when I'm cooking. There's a couple benefits to that. Obviously, you know that you have all the ingredients for whatever you're going to be working with. You also know that you have the tools that you need. As you're working with food, your hands can get dirty, of course, and then you're not rummaging around in a cabinet with nasty hands. The key is when you have everything sitting out, you want to make sure you remember where you put things. This is just good cooking skills for any kind of task, not just cutting, is to have an organized work area and to make sure you have the things that you need. All right, so if someone's new to cutting, you're going to want to start with something that they can cut with either a plastic knife or a butter knife. This has a little bit of a serrated edge to it, but someone's not near as likely to get cut with this as they would a sharper knife. So this is a good introduction to cutting kind of knife. You would want to orient your student to the knife, obviously, making sure they understand that this is the top of the blade that can't cut them. And they can explore the knife by kind of sliding their fingers down along the knife instead of going here and then feel this side. Don't do what I just did. But with this kind of knife, if they explore it completely, it's okay. I've even had students that'll pick a knife up the wrong way. So just orientation to a knife seems very basic, but if someone hasn't seen other people cooking, they haven't even picked up on those basics. So that's a good thing. I recommend starting with something that is fairly soft to cut and something that when it's a small area, so when you don't have to cut all the way across something that's large, you can just cut straight down and pretty much go right through it. So bananas are great for that. You could build this into a lesson where maybe they make banana pudding, or you can just cut the banana up and eat it. For some students, just peeling the banana, whoops, that came off. could be a lesson in itself, but you can, so remember whenever you're working on any kind of task, and my banana broke, it's always harder to do these things when you know people are watching. If you break it down into all the tasks that are required and make sure someone has all the prerequisite skills. So I've peeled my banana, I've gotten rid of my garbage. Sometimes people leave stuff kind of cluttering up into their work area. I like to get rid of my dirty dishes and my trash as I go. I just have my trash can right here. It has a lid that's locked up. People also can have just sort of an area on their, like this is a pretty big island that I'm working at, so I could have just designated sort of an area to put the garbage. But again, it's all about organization and knowing where things are. So my banana already kind of cut on that one end. So you would have them pick up the knife, again, making sure they've got the non-cutting part up. The back of the knife is up. And clients are, they're used to looking with their hands and their fingers, so there's going to be this tendency to want to kind of grab the banana like this. Or they're going to be totally nervous about the knife and they're just going to kind of be, hacking around and keeping this left hand back. I had an instructor a co-worker that I worked with at one time, and she would tell her students it was never okay to touch the food. I totally disagree with this. I know cited, even professional chefs touch food when they're preparing it. I washed my hands before I started this video. I cleaned this work area very thoroughly. When I'm cooking, I wash my hands a lot. I always keep paper towels nearby. So pre-COVID, we always had rolls of paper towels, but then we couldn't get those, and I found these tri-fold ones that, I don't know if you can see it in this shot, that, it's a stack of them. And I think even when paper towels are readily available again, I'll still keep these in my kitchen. It's really nice. You can reach over from the top and then just grab them. And you're not having to have two hands sometimes where you're tearing off the next sheet. They're maybe not as pretty as some of the ones we'd have in our kitchen, but they're totally functional. So I remind people that even if your hands get a little yucky, you can always wipe them off, and it's okay to touch your food. Now, when we get to another video where we're cutting food, say, that's been plated and at the table when you're eating, then you're obviously not going to want to have your hands all over your dinner. And that's a different set of skills. But for cutting for food prep, as long as your hands are clean, my philosophy is it's fine to touch things. If you, like some people like to wear gloves, and if you were in like a professional food prep area, that would be required. You would definitely want gloves that are really thin that someone can feel through. I'm not a fan of gloves because it does change the tactile sensation for me. So, but obviously if I was working, when I was in college, I worked at a bakery and I had to wear gloves for that. You got to be careful with cross-contamination and all that. That's a different lesson. So, all right. So the client might want to have their hands, holding it like this. And then when they cut down, they're in danger of catching their fingers. So I recommend that they curl their fingers up. They can kind of put their fingertips into it, or even if they want to just kind of curl them all the way under. Someone who's more used to cutting, they can even kind of grab like this and it's okay. But I just remind people that that's putting the fingers potentially in the cutting zone. So just be mindful of where your fingers are. So someone can locate where they want to cut and then move the knife to their finger and put it down and then cut through. The other thing that they can do is they can keep their hands far away and they can find the end of the banana with their knife and slowly bring it up and then kind of drag it across. So I'm getting the tactile feedback instead of with my fingers, I'm getting the tactile feedback with the knife. And then I can cut, and so it's up, drag, cut. Now I'm getting closer to my fingers, so they should always kind of be aware of their spatial orientation between one hand to the other hand. and be able to feel that, okay? There are knife guards that are a hard piece of plastic that if this was the hard piece of plastic, there's loops on the back of it, and you can slide your fingers into that loop. So then this piece of plastic would be like, this hand is the plastic, pretending here. So that would always be making this barrier between your hand and your cutting and your blade. Okay, so that is my one way of cutting. If I wanted to cut this banana in half long ways, I would recommend, and again, this is someone who's a little bit more comfortable with cutting, you can put your thumb on one side and your fingers on the outside and cut down, and you're keeping you're basically you're making the orientation is that your fingers are in the safe zone on the outside and your knife is lining up between those to go down the middle. And in fact, if someone was comfortable doing that, or you could do it for them the first time, a banana on a cutting board kind of can roll. It's a little sticky, so it sort of adheres, but if it was sliding around, if people can cut things in half and get a flat surface to lay down on the cutting board, that kind of helps as well. Another technique that people can use is, instead of cutting off slices, going down the length of an item, they may be more comfortable, cutting it into big chunks, and then they just keep cutting those chunks in half. Probably this is blocking, I didn't think about that. This is probably blocking my camera. I'll do it on this piece. All right, so I'm here in the center, and then I'm gonna cut this one in half, and then I'll cut that, and whoops, that wasn't quite in half, a little off center there, so I'll cut this one in half. So for some people, that's easier to just sort of divide and then divide the divided pieces to get a fully cut, chopped up banana. I do think it's important when you're trying to build concepts with people to, I started by peeling the banana. Even if they don't peel the banana, if they're just gonna cut it, let them touch and see what the banana looks like before it's peeled. Because I had a client once who thought bananas only were like this. They never had seen a full piece of fruit, because the banana always appeared to them in a bowl like this. So the idea of peeling it back and eating it like like you would eat it if you weren't chopping it up, was foreign to them. So be careful about skipping steps and missing concepts. All right, so I'm just picking these pieces up. There are scrapers, and I don't know where ours is. But that you could slide under. Here, let me rinse my hands off, and let me see if I can find that in our drawer. So again, this is, I said have what you need, but you could use my drawer won't open because the trash can is in the way. All right, we'll be editing this part out. Oh, here it is. It's right in the front. All right, so let me put these back on here. So someone could use, this scraper to pick things up, and then transfer that into the bowl. And then you want to remind them to explore and make sure they got everything. All right, so that is, I'll set this in the sink. That is if you're beginning to cut using a butter knife. As someone graduates, I guess, up to something they're more comfortable with, like they're comfortable with that and they're ready for something a little more advanced, you want to start meat, I would suggest using a hot dog. Again, it allows you to get those quick cuts and sort of that immediate gratification. But you could move up to a sharper knife. So this is actually a steak knife, but it would work for a hot dog. So I find that meat that's a little bit frozen is actually easier to cut. It gives a little bit more of a resistance. I need my trash can. I recommend that people keep their trash can pretty easy where they can find it. All right, so again, this is the same shape as our banana. It's just going to have a little bit more resistance. And again, you would have talked about different kinds of knives, sharper knives. This has a serrated blade, other ones don't. Those are just basic orientation to the tools that you would give to your student. All right, and again, we can do this same thing. Now see, I had my fingers out, but you want them, and see it's kind of, see how it's sort of wiggling? So in this case, they're gonna have to get maybe a little bit closer. And instead of just pushing down, this is where you can kind of show them that concept of having to actually go back and forth with your knife a little bit. So it's adding, we're kind of scaffolding and we're adding something to what we were just doing. Sometimes just helping, you know, I have a lot of clients that kind of grab their utensil like this, and it's kind of awkward, just sometimes just working on how to hold things where it's actually functional. And okay, so look, I've got my fingers how you would want to say, you know, you might want to turn those under, especially normally I have really long nails. I don't right now, but that can be an issue. You know, I kind of come along here and then I like chopped off my nail and now it's in the food. That's disgusting. So you definitely want to get people, but you mostly want to make sure people are safe. We could do that same technique that I talked about earlier where we, you know, maybe cutting these little tiny slivers like that is a challenge. So they could cut it into bigger chunks first and then take that chunk. Now they can also put their knife down, and remember, touching up here is the safe part. So if maybe they're not feeling that dragging across, and if they put their by putting the blade down on the meat, they know where the blade is, and they're safe to put their hand up here and kind of see, oh, well, that's about an inch. I really only wanted a ½ inch. So then they can kind of move their finger back and move it back over and then reach over. Oh, well, that's like a ½ inch, so I'm going to come a little bit more. So here's a safe way to monitor. You're putting your hand on top of the blade and seeing how much food is on either side of it, and you're away from that, the cutting part. So that's another thing that can happen is, you know, see, I'm very safe here. It's fine to be touching there, and I could see how much space was there. All right, so that's moving up to cutting something that's, again, it's just pretty much straight down. We're not having to cut across something wide, but they're getting that immediate feedback of cutting. Sometimes you'll have the problem with, instead of cutting straight down, the knife will turn and they end up with pieces that aren't the shape that they wanted, or they'll even, you know, instead of having the knife parallel to the cutting board, it's more like this stabbing kind of thing. And, you know, so they're trying to cut, but they're more straight up and down. So this is, there's a lot of spatial orientation instruction that goes in. Is just, do you have your knife lined up with the cutting board? Do you have the blade facing the cutting board, or is it to the side? Just really being aware of kind of where the blade is relative to the food and the work surface. So again, those are the skills that you would build. That awareness would come with working with the plastic or the butter knife, and really just, okay, now keep your hand there and see how you have your knife. Now feel that, is that straight up and down? And then, you know, getting them to get that muscle memory of what it's like to have it going the right direction. Because obviously stabbing like this is not going to accomplish the same thing as cutting straight down like that. Okay. So that is my hot dog and banana lesson. This is the technique I was showing you earlier with the banana for cutting things lengthwise. And now we have let me move these out of your way. Now we have a flat surface, and I can cut that way again between my, and again, the knife is coming, you know, I'm reaching over the knife on either side. Now, if you had something really skinny and teeny tiny, if someone's especially new to cutting, like this would be kind of small for someone that's, you know, I feel comfortable cutting that. I have really good awareness of where my knife is, where my hands are. But think in terms of bigger cutting, bigger chunks. I don't know what you would ever do with a little piece of hot dog like that anyway. But, you know, I'm just using this as I don't know that you would even cut your hot dogs up, but this is just something that's easy to cut initially for practice. Okay. All right. So, I'm going to get some raw chicken, and just because that's a little bit bigger for cutting, let me grab something to put my hot dog in. All right, so if again, you can transfer it like that. You could pick the cutting board up. This is another whole skill of how to line it up. People might find it easier to transfer from the cutting board into a bigger container than this. That would be another strategy. A lot of people find that instead of going directly into a pan, they like to put something in a bowl first and then pour the bowl into the pan. It's kind of what your person is comfortable with. I mean, if this was some kind of meat and I was going to put it in the pan, I would probably just take my cutting board across to the stove and transfer it directly into the pan. Some of your people aren't going to be comfortable with that or ready for that just because it's hot and they might miss part of the pan. That all just comes with practice, and you always want to practice with stuff that's cold and not sharp. So when you first start working with the stove or oven, you would not have it on and those kinds of things. All right, I'm going to wash my cutting board again real quick. I just rinsed it with the banana, but I'm going to actually use a little soap here with the hot dog. Obviously, people can use more than one cutting board, and you don't want to mix your foods together. Now, if you're cutting like onions and then potatoes, you can use the same board. Anytime you're definitely working with raw meat, you want to be careful. So again, those are additional lessons that would have already been taught about how to not contaminate your areas. People need to have a system just for where they put their knives. That can be a challenge for the whole family. If the family's used to throwing them in the sink, I know I put that in the sink, so I'll remember. But some people, you know, the family, if the person who can't see is digging around to do dishes or whatever, they don't know that knife is in there, that could be an issue. So just not only does the person who's blind or visually impaired need to have the system, but the household needs to be on that system as well. You know, if we have sharp knives, we always put them behind the sink until we wash them, or maybe the policy would be to wash them right away. or, you know, just making sure you're communicating, whatever it is that family comes up with. All right, so grab some of my paper towels here. Oops, I just flicked water on me. All right, so this is a chicken breast, and it already has some seasonings on it. I have two of these, so one of them I'm going to show you in a different video how to cook it and then cut it, but for this one we'll cut it. Now, this is vacuum sealed, and you could use a knife to cut this open. I'm going to use scissors. And again, scissors could be another whole lesson of safe ways to use scissors. That's beyond the scope of this video. Honestly, you could do entire lessons just on opening different kinds of packages. Pull top cans, cans that you need a can opener, Ziploc bags, twisty ties, other kinds of fasteners. So you can see I'm in my mode. I don't like to have a lot of goo on my fingers, so I'm constantly, that's where these paper towels have become my best friend. All right, so I have my, oh, I didn't finish my thought about the packaging. So that can sometimes be the biggest hurdle for some folks, is just figuring out how to open things. I've had clients before that, you know, we might spend an entire lesson working on opening soda cans, and for other people that's, you know, that they've already figured that out. It's not a problem. Everybody is kind of in a different place. So, but just be aware that that's what I was talking about, the task analysis. You would, you know, break things down into the simplest things, because making the sandwich may not be the problem. Getting the twisty tie off the loaf of bread might be the biggest problem. So it's, you know, sort of knowing the steps. All right, so I've got this chicken breast here. I've moved to this knife. Again, you could use the knife that I was using before. One of the tendencies is to think you should use a knife that's not as sharp. People are far more likely to get cut by dull knives because they don't use them properly. They don't cut the way they're supposed to, so then they end up, you know, forcing it, things slip. So even though it might seem scary to use a sharp knife, it actually is safer once someone has the basics. So again, this has a wide blade. I can have my hand up here and know where my blade is. This does have a sharper point on it than anything we've been using, but it's far away from my hands. I can use the same technique that we were using before, where I'm dragging across. I can feel the chicken with my knife. This chicken it's pre-seasoned, so I don't know if it looks like a funky color to you, but that's what's going on there. But this chicken, I've been talking so long, it's actually thawed more than I wanted. I like to cut chicken when it's just a little bit frozen, but okay. Now that's getting a little close for a new cook. So maybe the technique of putting it down and then reaching across to feel would be a good idea. For whatever reason, I don't know if sighted people do this or not. I never thought to ask anybody, but I guess because of the direction of the knife, like I've gone across, well, this one's a little bit too big still, so I'm gonna cut that. Again, I could do this. And see how that's kind of moving around, so I actually like to stabilize it with my left hand. When I work with left-handed chefs, it's confusing to me, but we work it out. All right, so you could, now we need to cut the other direction because I want this chicken kind of cubed up. I'm gonna use this, I'm gonna saute this up. So you can either rotate the chicken on the cutting board, or you can just turn your cutting board to change so now you're cutting across these. You could cut all, make one long cut here and cut several, but look how in order to keep it from moving, you can see I've gotten my fingers into what's really maybe not what's best. Not maybe, it's not what's best. So you could instead put your knife down. And again, if this was frozen a little bit more, it would be ideal. So I was too chatty and I let the time kind of get away from me here. So my chicken thawed while I was getting the camera set up and all that. All right, so this is really just using that same technique. It's just we've got more pieces. If this wasn't wiggling like this, if it was frozen, I might get another one out. Another technique someone could use is they could line it up and then they could even just push down. Like if we were cutting up onions or something, we can just keep our hand here. Again, remind them to keep their fingers out. You don't want your fingers curling down. This knife would definitely cut your fingers. All right. So I got a little pile of chicken here, but it's cut up. And that's how this would work. When in another video, I'll show you how I would cut this if this was on my plate. Well, obviously not this one; it's already cut. But I'll have a full, cooked chicken breast, and I'll show you how I would cut it without using my hand, using my fork as the guide. All right, so that's the basics on cutting. For getting stuff off the cutting board, I could even use this knife, but I would likely use that scraper that I showed you earlier. Or you could use your fingers, or a spatula, or whatever. All right, I hope this helps. Keep cooking. Bye. Hey everyone, thanks for coming by to check out my video. If you liked it, go ahead and click the like button, and you might want to subscribe to my channel, and you can ring the bell so you get a notification when the next video comes out. If you need to get in touch with me, maybe you want to make a request or you want to check on booking for an event, you can shoot me an email. It's Lis, L-I-S, sings for you, and the 4 is a word, not a number, @gmail.com. Hope to hear from you soon. Bye!